Welcome to the Creative Plan Podcast Network. Join us as we share our favorite RPGs, one-shot games, tabletop games, reviews of items, and convention panels, and other exciting things that we run into from time to time. Sit back and enjoy the show.
Hi, this is Kelly, aka Trixie from Ragnarok and Roll, assigned to Ragnarok Story, and Tilda Wimblewick from D&D Journey of the 5th Edition. First off, I would just like to say thank you to everyone for listening to our varied adventures, as well as for rating us on iTunes and rpgpodcast.com. If you haven't rated us yet, we would greatly appreciate it if you could. And if you're looking for more ways to support our efforts, we are now on Patreon, a great site where you can help us continue making more podcasts, as well as some special surprises for our patrons. If you can, please look us up at www.patreon.com/cppn. Every little bit helps. And again, thank you for listening.
Starting with Miss Gail Carriger.
Hi everyone, I'm Gail Carriger. I write steampunk, young adult, and science fiction and romance. I'm pretty much 50-50 traditionally published and self-published. Well, that's not what my income stream is these days. But I'm happy to talk about any nitty-gritty things to do with publishing and publishing industry. I will answer honestly any questions that you have, although I will categorically deny it later on the internet. So just be aware of that.
I'm Ashley Moore. I'm an artist and illustrator, and I also do gallery shows, and I am a straight artist. I do piano work. I paint pianos. Anything tinkering, that is what I love. So you can ask me all those kinds of questions.
I'm April Pike. I'm also an author. I write young adult fantasy and occasionally delve out of that. In particular, Ashley and I are here promoting this book, which we worked on for about 8 years. And it's gorgeous. And actually, business-wise, it's interesting because we shopped it around New York, and they did not know what to do with it because it was too long to be a children's book and too short to be a graphic novel. And they just, one of the lovely things about the self-publishing stream is that you can put out weird things. I know nobody in here likes anything weird, but some people do. Use your imagination. But like you can get out of what's traditional and normal and sort of the ideal marketing industry standard and get it out there. I think this is fantastic and amazing and beautiful, and mostly because she's got such amazing art in there. I also write novels, and it's interesting that you mentioned the split because, let's see, a year ago I had 12 traditionally published novels and 2 self-published novels, and I have since met thresholds and been a little pushy and pulled so many of my rights back, and so now I have 4 traditionally published novels, and all of the rest are out under my packaging umbrella, which is the company that put out this book. So yeah, things are changing.
And clearly we evolved with it. So
yeah, we've all done some of everything.
Let's talk about that change. So what was the industry like when you first started versus where we're at now? So what, we don't have to get into detail because I know you can talk exponentially about the ins and outs of it, but in terms of business, so we are all published authors or artists in some manner. Have things changed today versus when you first started? What are those channels like, and how difficult is it for any of these aspiring, wanting to be published, to get into the business?
Oh my God, would you like to start?
Sure. Okay, so I may be longer published than you. When did your first book come out?
2009, but I started submitting in 2000. It got picked up in 2008.
Okay, so mine was picked up in 2007, but we're just about twins here.
Yeah.
When I
so
started,
we can talk about the beginning.
Yeah, 99% of the stuff that was self-published out there was terrible.
Or it had the reputation for being it. It was really a dirty word when we started.
Yes.
Like real self-publishing was dirty,
and it was often earned. There were a lot of vanity presses that were pay to play, like
that were ruthlessly taking advantage of.
Ruthlessly, yeah, absolutely. And then also when I started, about 5% of my sales were ebooks.
So
I mean, it was tiny. It was just when ebooks were starting.
This is interesting because when I started, the big deal with Solus was that it had higher sales in ebooks than any other book Orbit had ever published.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Orbit was a relatively new publishing house in the United States, but they had an established track record in Europe. And so I had 25% ebook sales, and they'd never seen anything like it in 2008. It was insane. They were like, we don't know what's going on with your book. And I was like, I know what's going on with my book. The romance readers are reading it.
And it was an adult.
It's an adult book. Yeah.
YA was slower to pick up
way
the
slower.
sales.
Yes, way slower. So was, frankly, science fiction and fantasy was much slower. It was the romance readers. It was all romance and erotica at the beginning who really focused on self-publishing, picked it up, and it was the readers who were really willing to embrace it as well. So if you crossed into that genre, you got in early with that reader base.
And it was the readers, I think, that raised the level of quality in self-publishing.
Expectations as
Yes.
well. Yeah, they started leaving bad reviews if it wasn't edited properly, and But also simultaneously, then you started to get vendors embracing self-published books, or at least allowing for them to be distributed. So
and that had been a huge barrier.
Exactly. In the early days of self-publishing, you had to code it yourself. You used Calibri and Sigil. It was complicated. There wasn't any kind of cottage industry for cover art or anything.
It was never in a
So you had to be an all-in-one.
Yeah, you had to really figure it all out from the ground up. And those of us who did it super early on, and I just did tiny forays in order to mostly just to own my SEO on these platforms. I just did short stories first.
So they're talking about managing their online presence as well. So not just SEO is kind of the online world of
search engine
optimization. So there's all of these things that these brilliant women had to do themselves.
And people talk about search engine optimization mostly in terms of Google and your website and stuff like that. But when you are publishing, and I encourage anybody, no matter whether you want to go traditionally published or self-published, to jump on and own your identity in those vendors immediately. So Orbit, my traditional publisher, published my first book series successfully, but I always owned my Amazon Central account. I didn't let them have that. I jumped on and created the Gail Carragher Amazon Central. I claimed my books that they had published. So and I encourage everybody to do that, to at least have an Amazon Central. And own that yourself, because you may want, even if you don't think you want to self-publish now, you may want to in the future, or you may get your rights reverted to you, and that's the only way to get the third book in a series out or something like that. So,
and it's not difficult. You just have to prove that you're you.
Yeah.
I believe they sent an email to my editor, and she confirmed
something like
this email address is my author.
So you're not robots. This perfection is not robotic.
I was early enough in that they were sure, who would claim to be a random steampunk author? You're clearly.
And now you're like many people would.
So, do you feel like you guys face any just complications, difficulties because of the genre that you prefer to exist in? Because you were talking about how your stuff started picking up because of romance and all of this stuff. Was there anything inside of you that was well, I'm steampunk. Where are those readers? That's my target market. Is it difficult for you guys to be in this business? This is about the truth here, so.
Why don't you start in this one? It's the art steampunk crossover is fine.
Yeah, so for me, I have multiple sides of myself. I have an abstract artist side, and then I have my steampunk side, and then I have my children's book side, that sometimes all those merge into one. But other times, it's very much separate. So when I have the opportunity to work with a very talented author, then I jump on that and kind of ride her tails. So for me, it opened up new opportunities and doors. And so it was a great chance to try something new, even though that's a big part of who I am. So I think for myself, having that niche market was a great thing in the moment.
I was always more into just straight historical. I didn't really understand until at least 10 years ago what steampunk was. Actually, my husband was more into steampunk, and he was like, you love all of the old-timey clothes and stuff. You really should just push it one step further. So I've always loved historical romance. That's how I found you. And I was like, oh, look, there's other things in here.
There's dirigibles. What's going on?
And so, for me, I really embrace the Venn diagram, so to speak. I feel like, steampunk is in the middle, but there's a ton of romance and historical and fantasy. And I don't mind either being shoehorned into the middle or spread out into the outside. I think it's a really delightful audience to write for because nobody is rigid. Everybody's like, you have a good story, it's got at least some elements that I like, I'll try it. So it hasn't been difficult for me at all.
Ms. Gale?
From a pure, I'm going to be brutally honest, I said I would be, but from a purely marketing demographic, you guys don't count. Sorry. There aren't enough steampunkers. So you can't have a profit model where if you'd like to transition to being a full-time steampunk author and that's how you make most of your money, that only targets the steampunk community.
Yep.
It won't be supported as a writer, not even if you're a very prolific self-publisher. Now there are some micro exceptions. If you're gunning for self-publishing, KU, which is Amazon's exclusive, and you can write very, very quickly, and by that I mean one book a month, you could probably do a steampunk lit RPG or reverse harem or something like that, or find what the next big bandwagon is. But that's a very specific kind of writer. It's a very specific avenue, and your entire income stream would be Amazon dependent, which I urge against. But there are some exceptions. But those are reader bases that are not primarily steampunk readers. They're readers of other trends.
How do you merge that into other demographics?
Well, that's the key. So the key is to pick your lane, your bigger lane, I would say, and then go into YA fantasy with a steampunk edge, or go into comedies of manners, which is basically what I write with steam. That is steam. I describe myself as accidentally steampunk. I just sort of ended up writing it, and I was like, oh, what's this thing? Ooh, there's a whole.
She was brilliant enough to know
the costuming thing that goes with it. This is awesome. That is the way to do it, is to take the thing you love and then write in a genre. And I would say, especially if you're trying to do something like my career model, series are the better option, at least to start. So think in terms of 3 to 5 book series, that kind of thing. That's just generally what science fiction and fantasy readers enjoy and gravitate towards. And so you can get launched into a career easier that way.
So I have a question, kind of for all 3 of you, but I want to know what you guys think the differences are between being a published artist and a published writer. And I want to see kind of where those lines blur me, because some people might do both, right? So I want to start with you. So how does that work? How do you become a brilliant artist, and then you're like, cool, I have all of this. What do you do with it? What's the next step? Tell us.
So I think it depends on, your goals, your overall goals. So do you want to only do that? Do you want a revenue stream that comes from gallery work? And if you're going to sell in galleries, that's going to be vastly different than publishing. I mean, you're talking framing, you're talking print, you're talking all kinds of things. So knowing those markets can present multiple challenges. So once you kind of get that mind frame and set on what you want to do with it, then accomplish that task first, and then I would say then branch out, look at other opportunities, because as an artist, you're going to need multiple streams if you're going to want to do that professionally. I mean, you might find it in one thing, but it's going to take a lot of work, and a lot of the time it might last for a year, and then suddenly that funding was cut for X project and you're on to something new. So I think that's not dissimilar to writing and the industry of how that goes, but
just what I'm getting is know where you kind of want to go with it.
SMART goals.
Yeah.
Anybody who wants to look it up, I recommend that you not start any venture without a SMART goal. And I know that's business speak, but SMART goals.
We are in a business panel.
I know.
So I think that it's harder actually to be a revenue producing published artist. I would, and I think that you are much more vulnerable. I think it takes more practice, and you're much more vulnerable to theft and expectation of free work. Ashley was my daughter's art teacher when she was 8, and she's now in art school in Minneapolis. And the big thing that just drives her bonkers is that in order to get attention, you have to be showing your art. As soon as you show your art, anyone can hit copy paste. And she will go off on long rants about NFTs.
What
And
does that mean
but
for our crowd here?
That's all I know.
Non-fungible tokens.
Yes, that's
Digital-
literally all I know. It's where you own kind of someone else's work that you didn't make. And I know it's way more complicated than that, but that's all I know. I obviously, the experience that I have is my daughter, who started drawing as soon as she could hold a pencil. We put her in lessons when she was 8. She started taking college comics classes when she was 13, and now she is working on a bachelor's degree in comic art, which didn't even exist when I was in college. But she put more practice into her craft for 12 years than I put into writing at all during that time. I was always making up stories. I was always exercising my creativity, which I think is its own sort of weightlifting. But there is so much practice and so much technology these days with digital art that goes into art. And so I actually think that if you're going to be an artist, expect to work harder than if you're going to be a writer.
There is cover art to consider.
There is.
That is
That's
actually
true.
a very lucrative side hustle for some artists. A good digital or a good hand-drawn cover art piece is expensive. I pay about $450 for my rendered covers, which is a lot of money, but my cover
How do
art
you
is
search for something like that?
author groups is generally
Yeah.
recommendation or author groups or whatever. Like, you can come up to me and I'll be like, Sleepy Fox Studio is who I use, but you're going to be waiting 6 months. Like, she is one of the best.
And the good ones are in demand.
And the good ones are in demand. So as an artist, you can target, you can use that side hustle revenue to finance your other needs or requirements or whatever. If you can do cartoon work, there's a huge trend in cover art right now in cartoons. I recommend, if you are an artist who is interested in this angle, that you actually check out the new designer I'm currently working with. The name of the site is Sleepy Fox Studios. Keeley, Kelley, is the person who mostly does the work. But what you should do is look at her pre-made sample gallery, because what that showed to me is how very savvy she was about what was trending in the industry right now, and that was why I signed with her. And you can look at that gallery and see what's trending in the different genres. And that is that's golden, because it showed me that she knew what the trends were. And that is the thing that you will need to do if you go into cover art design.
Yeah,
you need
that's
to know
more
what's
the
trending.
art.
Yeah,
That's industry.
that's
research.
industry insider knowledge.
Yeah.
So that's a complete aside, though. But I agree. And one of the things we're alluding to, but not explicitly talking about when we're talking about the difference between writer and artist, is artists mostly have to at least have some luxury scarcity model, which is to say they have super products, very high-end, expensive things in time and money to create, that go for galleries, that sell at a high price point at a convention like this or what have you. Authors mostly don't. Like Brandon Sanderson accepted. Most of us will do, some of us. I do a luxury scarcity occasionally, but I work with a small press that does these beautiful leather-bound and cloth-bound short-run editions. It's called Subterranean, and they'll do 700 to 1,000 print runs, and that's it. If you don't buy it, you're never going to get that book again. But there are very few authors who do that or have the fan base to support it. Steampunk is one of those that might, because steampunkers like pretty objects. But you have to have retained, your hardcover rights and things like that. But all that to say, but those books are only $50 to maybe $200 for the super luxury editions. That is the luxury version that authors do. Occasionally, collector boxes or something like that. But we don't do this really high-end stuff that artists do. So from a business perspective, that's one of the major differences between the two avenues.
Yeah, authors mostly just have hardcovers and paperbacks.
Exactly.
That's the range
Digital
there.
and audio.
Yes.
And you can do the luxury version of audio, which is full cast audio, that kind of thing.
So I think I missed an opportunity here right in the beginning, but how did you get into business? How did you decide, I enjoy being an artist? I enjoy being a writer. How did you, what inspiration did you, I know it's hard. I usually ask this question right in the beginning to make me sweat. But how did that transition go or look like from I'm Gail, I enjoy writing. Now I'm going to do something with my work. How did that happen for you guys? Because some of these people here, they might just be here because they want to hear you talk, but some might be in that position where they enjoy writing or drawing.
Can I ask a question of the audience? How many of you in here would like to be writers, either as hobbyists or published or whatever? And artists at the same ilk? And how many are just here because you're interested in hearing us talk? Okay.
So it's about 50-50.
It's about 50-50. Yeah, that's good. Okay.
I started the last hard question. It's your turn.
Oh, well, this one, I mean, you can make it as lighthearted as you want, but are any of you guys curious how they got started? I guess we could ask, or do we want to move on to something else?
I can go fast. I fell into it ass backwards. I was a practicing archaeologist, but I've always written.
How did I not know this?
I've always written, and it was just a side hobby. I grew up in kind of an artist commune, off-grid sort of environment where all the artists were poor and starving, and I was like, well, that's a terrible idea. My business plan is academia. That makes me perfect.
That's a better
all
idea.
the money is never being an archaeologist. Anyway, but I always wrote, and I figured if I write it, I might as well try and publish it. And then Soulless was sort of a challenge to myself. Because I was like, I like this urban fantasy thing, but it's never funny enough for me. I like this historical stuff, but I want to muck about with history and objects because I'm an archaeologist. So I wrote Soulless as a challenge, and it's a 6-month challenge to myself, and I wasn't allowed to tinker with it. I had to send it out. And then it was sort of a slow burn, hot seller, and then Changeless hit the New York Times. Someone's Changeless hit the New York Times. Everybody was like, you have to change how you do stuff.
We're going to follow up on that with you two here after this.
So that changed everything. And that was when I was working on I was like 2 years out from my end of my PhD at the time. And basically I was doing too much work. I was like typing too much all day on a thesis and then all evening on a book. And eventually it just became, you have to pick. So
It's a lot of stuff.
yeah. Towards the business end of it, I am an archaeologist by training, which means, and I'm a science archaeologist, I have an MS, so as one of my many ridiculous degrees, which means that I have a very scientific mindset. I like statistics, I like spreadsheets, I like data manipulation, I like big data, I like metadata, I like figuring out what works and what doesn't work. It makes me very weird in the world of artists.
That explains so much about your own style of writing, though.
It does.
That
I work
leads into
outlines. I'm very organized about everything. It makes me extremely suited to being a creative business person, which I recognize is an aberrant personality type, but makes me very excited to talk about data all the time. And I have color-coded spreadsheets for everything. It makes me very happy.
I guess for myself, I started doing like booths and conventions for crafts and art when I was 9 years old, I think was my first one.
Wow.
And I was sculpting at the time and selling pins. And I've always had that kind of passion for making, but it wasn't until later on that I was like, I really want to illustrate. And it's been a slow, long process. I've had multiple things in my life. I mean, we're all human. We have things that come up and set us back. Actually, this book right here, my husband was in a horrific accident. And so that was my life for a long time, was taking care of him. And so my art career suddenly was like, oh, you actually don't have the possibility to have health insurance. So I ditched the art and did something else, medical field, so that I could be able to help support him, because art wasn't a steady stream that I had the time to devote to. So that's, how it's been, is a little one step forward, 2 steps back, and it's a process, and I'm still in the middle of it, if we're being honest. And so I think that's the thing, is different stages at different times, and you find yourself where you're at, and just not giving up on that dream. I think that's what happens with a lot of people. I think there's a quote that every child is an artist, and then they grow up and someone tells them like, you're not good enough, and they give it up.
I've ever heard.
And so I think that's the thing, just not letting that passion go for what you really love. Keep trying. It doesn't matter where you're at in your life. If you have that desire, The only one stopping you is you, especially within the world of self-publishing now and Instagram and all these social media things. There's a way if you want it bad enough.
And know what you want from it. Like,
Yes.
give yourself the grace to be like, right now at this point in my life, I need health insurance, whatever it is. Like, so I can't do 3 books a year. I can only maybe do 1 book every 2 years or something like that, and that's fine.
That is not failure.
Exactly. That's just the place you are right now. Is also dictates how much of any of these things you can be.
So I got started when I found out that it was possible, which was not until I was 22. By this time, I had a degree in creative writing. And you would think that I would recognize at that point that it is possible to have a career being a novelist, but I had never met anyone who ever did it. My college professor had a published book, but she was also a college professor.
Isn't that amazing when you meet somebody like your favorite author or just a person who's like published something and you're like, wait, an actual human writes the books. Like, oh my God.
I grew up, I read everything, and authors were like really amazing rock stars who were a step above human, and they certainly weren't me, So then I was living with my mother-in-law as we were getting ready to go to law school with my husband. And she said, I host this book club at my house. You should really come. It's just down the hall. You have no excuses. There's a girl in our group who's having a book published in 3 months. Her name is Stephanie Meyer. You should come and meet her. And it feels really weird, but she was the first person I met who made me understand that a regular person who is very much like me, we were both stay-at-home moms with young children running around, kind of wishing we could do something extra with our brain because it's a lot of work and not a lot of thinking taking care of toddlers, who are wonderful, fabulous, not one regret in that arena, but it did not use my brain very much. And so once it became possible, then I started pursuing it, and it took me 3.5 books, and even after I got an agent, I had a book that went out on submission and just crashed the fail bus. I had to still write another one for her. Also, all of this is normal. This is totally a normal process for most novelists. It sounds like you hit it out of the park your first time.
No,
but,
I have a trunk full of books that have been rejected, just
excellent.
like every other.
There, we all feel good now.
Yeah, everybody reads Solace. It's like, oh my God, and I was like, no, seriously, there's 10 of them that I look at now, and I'm like, I'm glad no one took that one.
Yeah. So I'm on a mission now to just make sure people understand that this is within the realm of possibility, and it must have worked because my husband went to law school, graduated, took a couple of years off, and decided to go back into academia, which is what he loves. But it's not. He's like, I'm going to school for an extra 4 years so that I can get a job that pays half as much. And I'm like, sounds like an excellent investment. And I said, but will it make you happier? And he said, yeah, I really think it will. And so I said, go, do it. My daughter grew up with a mother who did a sort of art. It's not visual art, but who made a living on her art. And I think that she's never questioned that she could have a career in art because it was always a possibility in her mind. So I just had to know that it was possible. And that's one of the reasons I like to come talk to people. It's possible.
And not only that, but I think it's better now than it ever has been. Like, I am happily still published with Trad, and I am about to go out on sub after 5 years or whatever with nothing to Trad. But traditionally, Trad is traditionally published. Publishing houses. But where was I going with this? But the revolution that has happened since we first got published in the self-publishing arena is insane. And the fact that there are so many ways to take advantage of it, both as publishing artwork, two-dimensional artwork, but also publishing books is insane. Like, this is the best time to be a creative in terms of opportunities, which when we started out back in 2007, 2008, just did not happen. Like, it just did not exist. So, that aspect of the digital revolution, as pain in the ass as it is to constantly be filing DCMAs and things like that, it's amazing. Like, the choices that I had to transition to doing more self-publishing and things like that, I'm so grateful for. I'm beyond grateful for the ebook revolution. So I do think that you guys are sitting pretty. You have a lot more options than we ever did. This is a golden age. And I say that knowing that traditional publishing is somewhat collapsing.
So I want to take a step into the more personal side of the business, right? So we can talk about what everybody sees on the outside, the steps to get success, or be successful, not get success, but same thing. What does the other side of that look like as professionals sort of functioning within your industries? What does that support look like? You were talking about your husband and like you being supportive of his changes and family. Like what sort of weight is that on personal lives and your own personal mental health, if you want to get into that? But like that is part of the business, is taking care of ourselves and leaning on our support systems. If you guys would like to talk a little bit about that side of it.
I highly recommend a supportive other, whoever that is. My husband just loves to watch me go off into space in the middle of talking, and he'll kind of count seconds and see how long it takes me to come back. And he'll be like, and I'll suddenly come back to the conversation and be like, oh, sorry, I was working. And he thinks it's hilarious. I know a lot of people who would be like, you never listen to me. You're always wandering off. And he's like, no, that's just part of you. I mean, as far as a very, dry resource way, a lot of authors have spouses who have health insurance. They work full time so that there's health insurance, because independent health insurance is very expensive. And then, someone who can close a door on your office and say, I'll take care of the kids, the pets, the plumber, whatever, just go work. It's so valuable to have that. I have no idea if you're married.
I am.
Maybe you have 12 kids.
If you don't want to talk about it, you can talk about
No, I can't
professional
talk about
Cthulhu,
anything.
so.
So I am chronically unmarried by choice. And so I pay for my own health insurance, among other things. And it's not bad, frankly. It's about, just under $500 a month. And I have multiple partners by choice, but they're not generally particularly supportive, or I guess by accident, really. But one of them's very useful in terms of like marketing and stuff like that, but not particularly interested in the business of writing. So what I have is a very large, very intimate support network of writer and artist friends. Some of them made at events like this. Many of them made early on in my career at places like WorldCon, small science fiction and fantasy conventions that had writer tracks, that sort of thing. I have writer friends who are friends from before I was published, writer friends from the convention circuit.
Those
And
are the best ones.
I think artist friends, I probably speak to this as well, which is you need these people. Like, as supportive as your spouse or significant others can be, you need people who understand the ins and outs of the business, both the business side and the emotional side. You need water coolers. I attend conventions because of the water cooler. I love talking and meeting fans and stuff like that, but I also really need to talk to other authors in person. Like, also, that's how we protect ourselves. Those of us in traditional publishing, we have to be able to have conversations about contract terms and stuff, even if we have ages. We spill on who's got like clause 10, the morality clause, like who's giving what kind of advances. The traditional publishing hates this about us.
Oh yes, because you can't imagine how many publishers are like, we just flat out, we don't offer this to any author.
Yeah,
and then you
nobody
go,
gets
this is what they said. And they're like, they totally offered that.
Yeah,
to me
exactly. Like
6 months
Macmillan's
ago.
basket accounting. They're like, no, we give everyone gets basket accounting, and then you'll meet like 8 authors who's like, yeah, my Asia got that. Doesn't have basket accounting. And you're like,
You don't want basket accounting.
Contract nitty-gritties is a whole other panel.
Yes.
All that to say, author friends are a huge part of it for me. Support networks, and then the other support network that I have in place now is a team of contract workers. And I'm a very great believer in outsourcing to professionals, artists for cover art, etc. I know, for example, that I could change the oil in my car if I wanted to, but frankly, I don't want to learn how to do that. I'd rather take my car to a mechanic's, right? And I feel that way about other aspects of the book industry. So as a self-published author, I have a team. Like, I have an assistant, I have a cover. She's lovely, I adore her. If she leaves me, I will be wrecked. Anyway, that's a whole other emotional bandwagon, but, and that is the problem with contract workers, of course, is they do leave you, and then you have to find a new one. But yeah, so I have a whole, like essentially a team in place now of people who I pay for their expertise and help me with my self-published projects. Developmental editor, copy editor, proof editors, etc. All those people are all people I hire. And that's the other thing that allows for my career and keeps me sane.
So I wanted to ask you something. So your support, this was interesting. You are publishing an A to Z. She actually posted to let everybody decide on this or this, this or this.
Oh, she's talking about a little ABC book
ABC
with
book.
illustrations on every page.
So part of her support kind of comes from everybody,
Yes.
right? Can you tell us a little bit about that? Sure.
So I decided during the pandemic everything was shut down and people were struggling and lonely and had lack of interaction. And I was delving into, I did a lot of traditional artwork and I had yet to really embrace digital. And so I wanted to push myself in the digital realm. And I thought, why not make this an interactive thing? And so I started an ABC book project. And I would post 2 separate animals, both starting with the letter A, and then let my group of social media friends choose which one they preferred. And then I self-published a book based on their choices. So whatever one animal won, that was the capital letter, and then the lowercase letter would be the loser. So that, and then on top of that, I now had a clientele who were invested in that book because they helped create it. And so that led to a nice business model because then they felt like responsible for that. But along with your question earlier, as an artist, one thing that I didn't really attribute much to was physical health. If you are illustrating or doing any kind of artwork or typing for a long amount of time, the physical toll it takes on your body can be dramatic. And so I would come home from doing my art and I'm doing this, and all my muscles and my whole body were shot. And so taking the time to build up my physical muscles makes me a better artist. And so just in the past little while, it was like, no, I've got to take care of my body so that I can still do what I love. And that goes along with mental health too. When we live in a world where, especially as an artist or like you were saying, Jill, reviews. I mean, you're reading stuff or seeing stars. Suddenly there's a physical, like, oh, here, this is how much we value you. That's not always fun in a world of Instagram when all these likes, you can easily attribute that to your self-esteem. So guarding yourself against that and saying, what is it really about? What's your why? Why do I do what I do? And knowing that is so important.
So I wonder.
Yes. I should add, I do that as well. I didn't talk about my group, but my group is I have a Facebook group that's extremely vibrant. It's sort of like got its whole life of its own now. And, but one of the things I will do is just pop in there and ask questions of the group occasionally, or poll the group, or ask them like what they're reading or whatever. And I am genuinely curious about what's going on. And I will genuinely, like, if I'm doing a poll, like that will absolutely influence like the decision, like which character should I write next or whatever. Like,
It's going to go on a spreadsheet.
Exactly. It's going to have its own color. It will have its own color. But more importantly, I only poll for the things I want to write. Like, let's be very clear. Like, I have 3 ideas. Like, those are the 3 that I'm not going to like poll for a character that I'm not interested in writing, because that's obviously going to be one that wins.
So we have about 10 minutes. I wanted to open it up to you guys. So does anyone have any questions? Yes, right here.
I was curious for the lady in the middle, you got the artist. If
Miss Ashley.
I guess coming up with your discussion is like, is there something I'm missing if I'm selling my art and for word of mouth, it's art or fiction on getting kind of, is there something I'm missing besides selling my art? Is there any kind of copyright aspects that I should be doing that I consider I got my name on? Are there other things, put aside the money I make or the IRS part, put that aside, but other, I guess, copyright and other things that I should be aware of that I'm not doing?
There's 2 lovely ladies. Go ahead, Jill.
I was gonna. This is like a slam my like fucking fist on the table. You have to have a website. You have to have a website. Okay,
So we've got a website.
We got a website.
That website should be. Wait. That website should be under your name. recognition. Don't put it under a series name. Don't put it under a cute little steampunk bullshit name. It's your name. You want people to recognize your name. Okay,
Yeah.
that's the second
Also, your
one.
copyright will last longer under your name.
Yes, and the next thing is newsletter. Do a newsletter. Please do a newsletter. Okay.
Okay.
I don't care if I'm an artist,
You
whatever.
feel strongly about this.
So
She
strongly,
just burst in
like
the emerald flame
the
right
like
here.
flame, yeah, like the
I
one.
just make sure whenever it comes out.
Thank you. The one thing I
Those-
regret more than anything is not starting a newsletter sooner.
Okay.
Like those are your eyeballs. Those are the only eyeballs you own. The ones that are on your
But those are
website
not
and your
legal
newsletter.
ramifications of other types
There-
of
there
copyright
are-
protection and
yes, yes.
non-fungible tokens like we talked about, that stuff's being used like that.
Because the
That's-
copyright is the moment your thing is posted, published, drawn, or written. The copyright
This is an art
exists.
piece that is sold to a one-of-one art piece.
That's
sold
your. That's your.
that will never be reproduced, and is now in the possession of someone else.
So, are you talking traditional art or digital?
Traditional, three-dimensional, hardcore,
Then they own that. Once
Right.
you accept that,
Okay,
then
so
they
there's nothing beyond that. Once you make the sale, and you hand it over perhaps
Yep.
with a
Yep. use
They
it.
can do whatever
Yeah.
they want to.
can they turn it into an NFT of their own? Can I do that before selling it, turn it into an NFT?
A physical? No, because the whole point of the definition of NFT is non-physical.
Not funky, yeah.
So it's a digital asset. You cannot turn a non-digital asset into a digital asset. You can take a photograph of that
Yeah,
piece
no,
of art.
that's all it is.
But a photograph's also
Yeah,
art.
So-
yeah. Or there are other things
So-
you can do with them.
And it-
But yeah, it's a digital thing.
And it also depends on what that contract would be between you and that person. You know, depending on, I'm selling prints at a con. They could take it and they could scan it and sell it, sure. But I think that's the thing. I technically own that. They could do that, and it happens all the time as artists. And that's the other part of the business aspect, is that's happening way more frequently
What's
than
that? What's
that.
that?
People stealing your art and
But once
selling.
it's sold to them, you just said that you lose
If
all.
it's a trick,
right.
go ahead.
I've bought an original art before, and as part of the purchase, the artist has made me sign a contract
Yes.
saying that I have no right to reproduce and create.
Yeah.
A digital version.
Yes.
Yeah.
You own that physical piece of art.
Thank you.
But
Yeah,
this
so-
is really what I was
yeah.
talking about, that it is so much easier to copyright and protect your writing
Sure.
than it
Sure.
is your art. It is a big challenge, and like I said, I know almost, this is how much I know about NFTs, but what I know is that it's going to revolutionize the art copyright industry
It
and
is.
not for the better. I think it's going to be a major challenge. I think that a lot of lawyers are going to make money off of NFTs, defending NFTs
There's a whole legal- there's a whole
and
thing-
artists.
There's a whole legal thing going on in terms of the difference between trademark or IP, intellectual property, and copyright. And that is something that you need to buy a book and read about.
Okay. so
Yeah.
you
Because they are very
Complex
different,
issue.
they're legally different,
So-
and
You're
authors-
not wrong to be confused.
I'm
Yeah.
sure these ladies have talked to many of professionals, and I would advise the same. I have a
Yes.
question here, and then our final question is going to be here. So you,
So my question is that when you're writing something that is historically based, and I know like you bring in Queen Victoria in your stories and stuff, what is the limit to that you can do that fictionally without pissing somebody off if they're name recognition, even if they're someone who's no longer living? If it was, if you wanted to bring in like in the, we have Van Gogh in some of the Doctor Who. We have, Charlie Chaplin pop in, who definitely has a family, who's definitely very active in his in his branding. What is the?
You want an honest answer?
Mhm.
If the family is still alive and litigious, I wouldn't touch it with a 10-foot pole. So no Conan Doyle or anything like that.
Yeah.
I prefer not to use I'll use what I will call super celebrity historical figures like Queen Victoria, because there comes a point where they're like zeitgeist rather than individuals, and it's not like the Windsor family is going to assume you for using Queen Victoria. I mean, that seems ridiculous. But I have not used historical aristocratic names, which I would have liked to have used because the family is still alive in the British aristocracy. So I just changed the name a little bit and make it silly or fun. When I write comedy, I can do
get creative with
that. Do not put celebrity, like currently alive
Yeah.
celebrities of any kind ever in
Yeah.
your work. It's just an area where like you're asking.
And then right here, darling.
Yes, actually, I have a question because my husband is an author, or he wants to publish, and I was just wondering what advice you could give him.
Oh,
Like,
He's
let me
just
ask you a
starting.
question back. Has he finished a book?
He's working on a book right now.
Okay, so this is the first advice to me, from me to me, from me. Finish a book, because there's a mental barrier in everyone's head that wants to write a book. That it's this big thing. It's the marathon of your brain. But once you finish one, like it breaks that barrier down, and it's not so hard to think that you could finish 2, you could finish 3, you could finish 10, and you could finish 20. And the fact of the matter is, you probably will have to write several books before you have something not only just good enough to be accepted by traditional publishers, but that you feel good enough to put out on your own. Either way, though, both of those bars should be very high, and it will probably take you a few practice novels to get there, and that's okay.
I agree. The one piece of advice I give, which I can guarantee you most writers in this audience are going to completely ignore, is you're not allowed to edit what you are currently writing. You can only keep writing. You can edit perhaps what you wrote the day before if you're somebody who's writing daily or regularly. But I know too many writers who are perfectionists who get into a spiral of just re-editing that first chapter or those first 3 chapters. And I can
What's
see everyone
128%?
You gotta stop. You have to finish it. The point is the end goal. If you wish to be an author, and I make a distinction between writers and authors, but if you wish to be an author, somebody who's published somewhere or another, you do have to finish the thing. And for me, that was getting outside of my perfectionist tendencies, and for me, that was simply not allowing myself to edit until I was done.
Now, what about when you are done?
Then I hate myself because there's a whole bunch of like TK, what I call TK. So the letter T and K don't exist together in the English language. So I put a TK. If TK means I have to go research something, I gotta go like check the consistency of something. I decided to change somebody's name.
Stop on the way to those.
I do if it's like very important to the plot, so I have to know how a syringe works in order for a plot point to happen. But if it's like set dressing or I need to describe something, everything, yeah. The whole point is to get the story out on the page as quickly as possible. And that's just because for me, the first draft is the hardest thing to do. I know for some people, the editing is the hardest, especially pants writers or discovery writers. They have a hard time with the editing process. I just need to get it out as quickly as possible. So I construct many, many tricks to like coax myself into finishing the thing, because once the thing is finished, it's just like, okay, it's done. Right?
I know way more authors who have trouble getting past chapter 1 because of that than authors who are done, who are struggling with in the mire of edit.
I agree.
So
yeah.
I think you're absolutely right, and seriously, it is a hole that so many writers fall into. I know so many writers who are like, I've got 3 chapters, they're amazing, and I'm like,
I'm sure they are, but it doesn't matter if you can't finish it.
In conclusion, because we're at time,
Okay.
one last statement, and tell us where we're at in our vendor spaces, or if you're going to be somewhere next.
My other piece of advice to new authors is basically you're probably going to lose your first couple of chapters. A lot of authors are working out stuff in those first 2 chapters that the readers don't want. So just relax. It's okay. You're going to have to let it go. Sometimes you have to let go a whole book. I just trunked an entire book, and I know I could have sold it, but I was like, oh, it's not good enough. So, but almost every debut author at least needs to lose the first couple of chapters of their book, and that's fine. Let them go. It's all good. So stop reworking them. You're going to have to cut them out anyway. You can find me mostly at panels. You catch me walking around if you want me to sign something. I'm happy, absolutely delighted to do that. I don't have a table or anything.
Sunday morning, she's going to be at the pronounce one, the coffee.
Oh, Coffee Clutch.
Thank
Yes, you can come to a Coffee Clutch, and I'll be happy to sign anything there. I walk around with a pen though. So. Yeah, we're in the same Coffee Clutch.
Yep.
are you there?
No.
Yeah.
Just
You are
me
invited
and
by proxy.
Yes. And the writer.
All right, Miss Ashley.
I would say if you're a serious artist and you're looking to get into any kind of children's book publishing, master studies are your friend. If you don't know what master study is, that means looking at artists that you really like and reproducing their work for yourself, just so you understand the process, color palette, sketching, so you really get it, and then developing your own style. I think that's one of the biggest things that really can help jumpstart you into understanding who you are as an artist. April Lynn and I have a table just outside the vendor hall. If you want
So
to
they're in the vendor foyer at our group and VIP tables there. And Miss April Lynn, any final
I'm just going to add to that because particularly you had a legal question. In case you are concerned, there is absolutely nothing unethical with copying another author's work for practice. This is centuries-old practice. You just then do not display it, sell it, anything like that. It is for practice, but you are totally welcome to copy any author's work for practice.
I also have a craft book. If you're interested in narrative, oh, shill, I forgot that part. It's called The Heroine's Journey. It's a rebuttal to Campbell's Hero's Journey because most people don't realize there's an alternative narrative pattern, and it does have a how to write it section. And then I have a bunch of bookmarks down there, including all of my books and everything.
Thank you so much, ladies. We will be looking forward to speaking with you more as we proceed through the treacherous Wild West content. Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Creative Play and Podcast Network. And feel free to enjoy our other shows, such as D&D Journey of the 5th Edition and Scion Ragnarok and Roll, a Scion hero to Ragnarok story. Thank you for listening.